Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much. I think I would like to start by thanking Daniel for having invited me to give this talk. I know that the first two presentations have been on intellectual property, and of course, you would expect some overlaps. So while I give my presentation, there will be certain areas that I may not need to repeat because they have already been discussed. But I'm really thrilled that Thrive has put the concept of intellectual property in as a key aspect of the Thrive program as we go ahead, because for the past couple of years that the Thrive and other Deltas programs have been in operation, there has actually been cases where a lot of new findings with potential for patentability has actually come up. So it's good that we create this awareness, and so that you are aware of what is patentable and what is not patentable and how to go about it. So the two first presentations have actually addressed quite a number of some of the issues. This slide would have been very useful without the first two presentations. But nonetheless, I want you to look at the question. Okay, and then my next slide, I've mentioned that if you don't see a problem with this question, then you need this presentation. So, but I know that because of the first two presentations, you've had a very good idea about what intellectual property is all about. So the objectives that I came up with for this presentation is to give an overview of the concept of intellectual property, intellectual property protection, and intellectual property rights, which has been covered to a great extent already. But most importantly, to raise awareness on the importance of intellectual property in research and the innovation process, especially within the context of Thrive and the research that Thrive is doing. Some of the issues that I'll touch on, which have already been touched already, would include the policies that govern IP and innovation within AAS-funded research programs. I'll try to make a connection between research and innovation from the perspective of the researcher, and of course what intellectual property is, which has been described already, and whether you can protect ideas, what an invention is, who is an inventor, and who owns the rights to invention, and of course where and how and where you can protect the intellectual property. Some of these things are very unique to us as scientists in a very specific way. So the IP policy framework within the African Academy of Sciences consists of a number of policies. If you look at your grant terms and conditions, you will find maybe aspects of IP and IP ownership and how IP should be treated. We also have a data management, sharing and protection policy that touches on aspects of intellectual property. We have an IP policy, which I'm quite sure a lot of us as researchers within Thrive haven't yet seen, and how we hope IP should be treated. Then we have what we call a policy on consent, revenue and equitable sharing, which also guides how we share revenues when we invent and actually go on to commercialization. Then of course we also have what we call an equitable healthcare intervention statement, which actually states that our main focus is to improve health for the world, and therefore any inventions that are able to improve health, we would make sure that our researchers and the people we fund, they don't come up with any strategies that would impede access by humanity towards this type of inventions. I talked about making the connection between research and innovation. So there are basically about three aspects that within science, we can talk about the scientific value of research. So in this case, you'll be asking yourself whether it is a disruptive technology that you're coming up with, which is not based on existing paradigms. So it's a very important question to establish scientific value. And then the second one is whether whatever you've invented or coming up with is a sustaining technology. So in other words, is it a technology that is derived from existing technologies, or a combination of technologies that are already existing as well? It's important to note, therefore, that not all research that has scientific value has commercial value. So science may have technical value or scientific value, but it may not have commercial value. And then how do you determine commercial value? It simply means that there is a market and customers who are willing to pay for your technology or intervention because it meets a perceived need. So if you come up with something and you're able to establish that there is a commercial value, then you would be on the way to processing your IP. And then commercial value is normally determined by a number of feasibility studies. So we want to establish things like market value. We want to look at competitors and a whole of other aspects that you have to go through in order to establish the commercial value of your technology. So once you've done that, it's therefore important to consider how to protect your work legally from protection is very critical to commercial success, as has already been mentioned. And then in general, there are about 4 major classes of IP, which I think a lot has already been said. Now my next slide is defining that connection, and it simply means recognizing a relationship that might lead to discovery, which is usually referred to as the aha moment or the eureka moment. I think we know about a famous Greek scientist who invented or discovered something. He had this connection and had to jump out of the bathtub naked. That's the excitement you get when you have actually made that connection in discovering something with commercial value. So let me also emphasize that from this discovery comes an invention that spawns applications in a variety of different contexts. Then when you reach this level, then you want to do the following. Identify the scientific value of your research, the commercial value you protect, and then you seek professional help from the experts, like our first 2 speakers who have addressed you on this particular area. Intellectual property has already been defined with examples, so I'm not going to bore you with this description. We've talked also about intellectual property rights. I think that's been talked at length, so there's probably no need for me to go through this. Even the issue of territoriality, that all these rights are territorial in nature. In other words, if you seek protection in Uganda, then you cannot go harass people in Kenya where you did not protect. So basically that's the whole idea of territoriality. So if you need to claim your rights, then you would have to go to, if you need to claim rights, if you invent or protect in Uganda, then, and you want to claim in a number of countries, then you have to do it in most of those countries. And the international original systems like ARIPO or the WIPO systems will provide you that opportunity. Perhaps some other things that have not been mentioned in a big detail would be maybe protection for inventions like patents. It's already been mentioned. Perhaps a few things to mention here is, in addition to the conditions for patenting, or for seeking protection for patents, about being new, novel, and non-obvious, having an invention step, and being useful. I just want to highlight also that it's normally protected for a period of 20 years from the date of filing. Could be granted by a group country or group of countries. I think that's come to the fore. And then the fact that it's region, country, region specific. Of interest to researchers is the whole concept of publish or perish and how that fits into seeking protection for intellectual property. And I've borrowed this table from De et al. That tells us about the worst scenario, that if you invent, you publish or you talk, you file disclosure, and then you file for patent, then you have 0 chances of getting the patent because you would have already disqualified yourself by not meeting the whole idea of being novel or new. It would have already been in public domain. Then the next one, which is better, is that you invent, file, publish or talk, and then file for patent. But the best would be you invent, you file for disclosure, then you file for patent, and then you publish or you talk. Important to note who an inventor is or who an invention is. So invention requires 2 elements. You need to conceive and then you need to reduce to practice. So an invention is conceived when it is sufficiently formed in the mind of the inventor so that he or she can describe to those skilled in the art how to make and use the invention. So an invention is completed when it is reduced into practice by either making a working model or filing a patent application. So I think in this particular area, we have a lot of people who have ideas and they believe very strongly that they have to stick onto the ideas because the ideas will be stolen. So basically, protecting ideas is almost not the whole idea. Those who own an invention would be the inventor, or if the policy of the institution allows you to own or to transfer it to your institution. So that's another thing that you need to bear in mind. So there's a possibility of joint inventorship, which could result in co-ownership as well. So most of the times, your institution's IP policy would actually address the issue of ownership. I think a lot of information has been given on obtaining patents, so I'm not going to go into that. Perhaps one was not mentioned is the duration that it may take to get some of these patents, that it takes quite a while. And then I move on to maybe a bit of information about copyrights, protection for literary and artistic works. So copyright gives you, or it's a set of exclusive rights granted by government for a limited period of time to protect a particular form, way or manner in which an idea or information is expressed. So it does not protect ideas as such, but the form in which the ideas are expressed. So duration about 50 years plus, or duration is until author's death plus 50 years after the author's death. In the US, it's duration of author's life and plus 70 years after the author's death. So it includes some other thing that I need to highlight here is that it's automatic protection. In other words, you probably don't need to register it, but it's important to register. So once you affix it on a particular form, then it is considered to be protected. Other things to mention here would be moral rights, which we mentioned earlier on, and then of course exceptions to copyright and related rights. So copyright has exceptions maybe for educational purposes, and then you probably would not need to bother too much as long as you're not making money out of it. I'll skip this one and move on to trademarks and service marks. Trademark being a distinctive sign of some form or kind, e.g. word, symbol, sign, number, which is used by a business to uniquely identify itself and its products and services to consumers, and or to distinguish the business and its products and services from those of other businesses. Conventionally, we use a word, name, phrase logo or a combination of those. Important also to note that there are other forms of trademarks that don't fall in your conventional sense. Like you could also have sound and smell that is trademarked. So for instance, I'm quite sure a lot of us are wearing different forms of fragrances, and if you're in the business, if somebody is wearing maybe a Christian Dior and passes next to you, you should be able to recognize that this person is wearing a Christian Dior. They can also be bought or sold, can last forever as long as they are used, and you have registered trademarks where you see the sign with an arrow in a circle that indicates that the trademark is registered, or you can also have unregistered trademarks with a sign TM that indicates that it's not registered. So if I move on to registered designs, it looks at distinctive look of objects or items, must be new, must be unique, registered in a country or group of countries, also country or region specifics, and then can be bought, sold. It lasts for about 25 years. Then of course there are trade secrets, which would be a formula, practice, process, design, instrument, pattern, or compilation of information that is used by a business to obtain advantage over its competitors within the same industry or profession. The key thing is that it must be kept secret, and as long as it is not disclosed, then protection continues. I think a very popular trade secret that we all know is Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola formula, we are told, or we learned that they never sought for any form of protection in the conventional sense, apart from just keeping it secret. And we also read that there has been so many attempts to steal the Coca-Cola formula. Perhaps those attempts led to other products that look like Coca-Cola but never really taste like Coca-Cola. I think we know them all. Meca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, and a whole lot of other colas, but nothing really comes close to Coca-Cola because I've never succeeded in stealing the formula. When to obtain protection and your IP, that's been covered in detail. How to obtain, that's also been covered. And then just to summarize maybe some tricky ones and what's protected. Copyright, what is protected, expression, not ideas. Criteria for protection is originality, to obtain fixation in a tangible medium, protects against unlawful copying, and then duration, like I mentioned, is normally life of author plus 75 years in the US, and then other countries plus 50 years. You can also check the details for trademark and patents. I've mentioned, perhaps I haven't used the word innovation chasm or so. Within the research context, it's normally very challenging to be able to translate research into products and services. And there's always a gulf, a lot of the challenges that involve getting from an IP into an actual product and services. So in the trade, we normally refer to as an innovation chasm. And I think as we go ahead, most of the institutions of the continent are really not equipped to do a lot of translating into actual products and services. We've mentioned earlier on, or the former speakers talked about payment for registration. So you can imagine that you file a patent and you're expected to pay annual renewal fees for the next 20 years during the life of the patent, and you are unable to get anybody to buy it or to license it and stuff. So at the end of the day, there are a lot of other people who just wait until it expires and then they make use of it. So there are a lot of challenging areas to be able to get this particular transition. So I end with some university inventions that are in daily use all over the world. Key ones being things like synthetic Taxol, Netscape browser. There are also some foods and nicotine patch, for instance, for health and vaccine, and even the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, where we do brain scan and other scans. These are all things that came up from research conducted by scientists like all of you, or most of you in this audience. From South Africa, just a few. Rose preservation is a very good one, especially when you're able to harvest rose flowers from Kenya and send to Russia, and they get to Russia in the same state. So that's something very interesting. And then finally, I hope with the 3 presentations in this morning, you all know what's wrong with this question. Thank you very much.